Tell us a little bit about your family as you were growing up as a young child. What kind of routines did you have, special days?
Well, first of all, I was born into a family of 10 children, and I was number three from the top down out of the 10. My mother and father were hardworking individuals. My mother had a seventh grade education. My father had a fourth grade education. Of course, as you well know, back in those days, it most African Americans of that time didn't really feel a need to further their education, nor was it readily at their disposal to have more advanced education. They felt that once you got into teachers or something of that nature, that was about the only door for professional. But even if they could have gone to further education, their families and then the family out the family that we were in, they couldn't afford it. So she had a seventh grade education and he had a fourth grade education. But with that amount of education, I can remember they were both very intelligent people. So apparently there's some validity in the fact that experience is a good teacher because I think common sense was probably the avenue toward their achieving. So they had good common sense and they were well grounded and they worked very hard, very hard. My father was a sort of an all-around individual. He was a mason by trade. He worked on a farm. He did mechanical work and things of this nature. I admired my father because he was very good at making a way out of no way. And I recall one incident we were doing something to the house, and he needed a square. Well, I'm a little more fortunate than he because if you go up and look at my tool shed, I probably have 10 squares. And so, but it's through him that I have what I have. And he didn't have a square, and he had a ruler, and he took this ruler and measured off 3 pieces of lumber and tacked them together, and he made a square, a most efficient square. And he was this type of person we raised as a youngsters. And my mother worked as a maid. She worked most of her life at the boys' home in Eldersburg known as Strawbridge, which was a home for wayward boys. She worked most of her adult life there. And I recall, she used to walk over the hill, which was probably 1.5 to 2 miles, right around 2 miles out across the field to work every day. And she walked rain, shine, or snow every day. She plowed through it. She didn't miss a beat. And anyway, they were both extremely active when it came to work. Things like segregation and the lack of education just did not afford them the opportunity of becoming rich people. So we actually lived in next door to poverty, really. We were brought up in the post-Depression era, and the Depression was a time when, even the post-Depression era was a time when you could not go, you didn't have the freedom to go to the store and run in and pick up a loaf of bread like you do now. Or you didn't have the freedom to run out and, I'm going to take the car over to the shop and get 4 new tires stuck on it.
Right.
You didn't have these freedoms. You could only buy what the government allowed you to buy. And the government control this by issuing you what we term now as food stamps. They had another name for them then, but it was basically food stamps. It was rationing stamps, they called it. And you received so many stamps according to the size of your family. And in that category, we sort of got over on a lot of other people because we had the larger family. But then you're feeding more people. You're taking care of more people. And as I recall, rationing was everything from bread and milk and bologna and sausage, right on down to tires and things on an automobile. I remember back then we could not go out because of wartime and because of rationing. You couldn't go out and buy brand new tires. You bought retreads because all of the rubber and stuff was being used for the military overseas. I can also remember I started to work really when I was 8 years old. We used to go out into the fields for Mr. Armfield Gosnell, who was one of the big farmers in Johnsville, and we would pull watercress out of the cornfields because tractor cultivating then was not a thing to be had in this part of the country. They used horses. So he would hire probably 10 or 15 kids and then put us in rows, and we would walk the rows and pull watercress and throw them in piles, and then the wagon would come along and pick them up and they would dispose of them. I also remember working, there was a weed that used to grow probably about 3.5 feet high, and on that weed there was a puff, and I don't see it much anymore today, but there was a little puff cone. This puff cone held a silk-like material in it, and we used to collect these puff cones, and you sold them because they used this silk to make parachutes. We also collected tin cans. That was all for the war effort and stuff like that. But basically, we grew up pretty much an impoverished family.
Now, what were Sundays like at your
Sundays
house?
Sundays were like you got dressed in what you could afford to get dressed in. You didn't run to the closet and take all day to pick out what suit you were going to wear. You had that one suit and that one pair of shoes, and you had to put a little spit on them to make them look good, or maybe a little oil, and they might have a hole in the bottom with some cardboard on them, but you put on, that was your Sunday best, and you went to church on Sunday mornings. And church was a highlight at that time. It was a good time. You got to see people from the community, and then you got to meet people who would come in from other places to the church. So church was a good time. It was a learning time because you went to Sunday school, and that's where you kind of learned about different things in different parts of the world and various parts of the Bible or biblical settings. So, and being a poor kid from the country who very seldom got outside of the Johnsville area, very seldom. These were all new things. So you can appreciate the fact that when the statement, when somebody says books will take you on a journey, because that's what it did for us. Books took us on the journey. We would travel. My grandmother on my mother's side lived in Baltimore on Stricker Street, and probably about every other month we would pack in the back in the car. My dad at the time, as I can remember, had one of the cars he had was a 1929 Buick, and it had a rumple seat on the back of it. The heater didn't work, and we put an old kerosene heater in the thing to keep warm, and we trekked off to Baltimore to my grandmother's house. And just for Marcus's benefit, it took us, it was 26 miles from our house to the grandmother's house, and it would take us almost an hour to get there. When you can jump in the car now and run 50 miles in a little less than 35 or 40 minutes.
Right.
And so we would all go down to my grandmother's house, and I think my grandmother kind of, I don't think she liked to see my father come with that whole bunch of kids, because it meant she had to feed all of us, which most of the time she didn't. And we did that up until I was about 10, 11 years old. And like my father, I became very good with my hands, fixing things and repairing things. And I think that's when my grandmother and I kind of parted ways, because when I would go down there, when I got there, she pretty much had a list of all, come on, Junior, you can fix this. All Junior's good with his hand. Come on, Junior. And then you might get a little half a sandwich, you know. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. Come all the way down here. Been here a couple of hours. I've done all this work. And I'm going to get a half a sandwich when I got about 9, 10, 11 years old, somewhere. And I started telling my parents, that's okay. I'll stay home. I'm not going down there. But that, too, was a learning experience, because we got to go in the city. Dorsey Whitaker, bless his heart, had a 1941 beer can on a Saturday nights. He used to take us to Baltimore to the movie on Pennsylvania Avenue, the Royal Theater, the Met Theater, and the like. And every once in a while we would go, he'd take us to Baltimore to see somebody like James Brown and Red Fox or somebody like this.
Now,
He
what
would
about
also,
the movie theaters here?
now the movie theaters here, because we couldn't go. We could not go unless you went to the State Theater. Here you went to the balcony. And Siceville had a little movie theater. And you couldn't go there unless you went to the balcony. But you see, I had a cousin, well, she's deceased now, and her father was white. In fact, a white man from Eldersburg. And she was older than we were. And she was I don't want to say fat, but she was stocky. And a lot of times we would, I don't know how you say, just out of devilment, we would go to the movie theater down to Siceville, and she'd put on this great big fur coat and this great big broad brim hat and have these bags, and we'd come along with these bags. And they'd say, you can't sit down here. And she'd say, well, they work for me. We're going in here and sit down. So we would go in and sit down in the movie. But you know what I learned out of that? I learned then that it doesn't pretty much matter what someone puts in front of you. If you keep a level head and you think a little bit, you can always find a way to get around it, get over it, or if you have to, you go through it. Mm-hmm. And I think that was kind of my signature through life. And things like not being able to go to the movie theater, not being allowed in certain parts of town, not being allowed in any decent schools. We went to the two-room schoolhouse there in Johnsville, which was Johnsville Elementary. Then we transferred to 6th grade to the Robert Moton School up here on Charles Street. And we were limited to the things that you could do, basically because of your race. But being an impoverished family really was not all bad. What it teaches you, first of all, which is probably one of the most important lessons in life, and that's self-reliance. You quickly learn that you've got to depend on you to get you through. That to rely on someone else, it just isn't going to happen. To make it, you have to make the initial step. You have to put forth that great effort. Once you put forth that effort, then usually people, when they see you sincere about something, they jump on board and they're going to give you help. It gives credence to the Bible verse that says God helps them who help themselves. Mm-hmm. Well, people help people who help themselves too. And this was a lesson I quickly learned. So therefore, I would always, when conflicts came up, or when my parents, who were definitely afraid of segregation, they were definitely afraid of the white man. And when things came up like, you know, you can't do this, you can't go there, you can't say this, I kind of balked at it because I didn't understand it. I didn't want to accept it. And I remember things that stick out in my mind was they used to say, you know, you have to come in the house. You can't play in the yard. Because why? The Klan's going to ride tonight. And, you know, you're like, this is a nice, breezy summer day. School's out. We're playing in the yard. We're 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. You don't quite understand, why do I have to go in the house? And who is the Klan anyway? You know. And if you don't obey the white man, the Klan's going to hang you. If you don't obey the white man, the Klan's going to whip you. I remember the story about one of my father's brothers who was beat to death by some white folks, white men down in the Siceville area, and the men were never charged. And several other incidents of that type that occurred back during the day, and nobody white was ever charged. And our parents would tell us these stories. But even at that, I was defiant in the fact that, no, you know, I'm busy playing. I don't know who this Klan is, but I don't want to go in the house. I don't know who they are. I don't care who they are. I'm playing. And I have a right to play. I have a right to play in my yard. It's not like I'm in somebody else's yard. I'm in my yard, so I have a right to play. And these types of things just did not sit well with me. And from that early age, and I recall one night, my father worked at Bethlehem Steel, and he worked at night. Just about dark, my mother herded everybody in because the Klan was going to ride. And I guess I'm probably about 11 or 12 years old now, maybe 13, I don't recall. And I got real angry. And my father had an old Ivory Johnson shotgun. And I thought, well, they can ride tonight if they want, but if they stop here, it's going to be trouble. And I snuck the gun out of the house. And I went down on the front porch. And I sat with the gun across my lap. And it was loaded. And I thought, if they stop here tonight, either I'm going or they're going, but somebody's leaving. And I was bound and determined that I wasn't going to sit still, and that this simply had to stop, because I was having an awful time trying to conceive of the fact that you're telling me that these people don't like me because of the color of my skin. It just doesn't make sense that you should. But then the Bible says that men are created equal. The Constitution says that we are equal, and we should have equal rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But you're telling me that somebody is telling me that I can't have A, B, C, D, or E because of the color of my skin. You're telling me that the white man says that I'm dumb, I'm stupid, that I stink, and that I'm dirty. But what little I can find out about slavery was, yes, we have a right to be, at that point, we had a right to be dumb, stupid, and stinky, because number one, we weren't then allowed to get an education. So then if you don't get an education, you're dumb. If they don't give us soap and water to wash, of course you're stinky. You know, these things. But I had soap and water I could wash. I had shoes, may have had holes in the feet to put on my feet. You know, I went to school, I was learning. So, you know, none of this in this equation came together. For a boy of that age, or anyone commonly thinking, none of it made any sense. So that particular night, I just grew hostile, and I said, well, hey, if they come tonight, either I'm going or they're going. And if I got to go, I'm going to take somebody with me. But they didn't ride. My father came home about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, smacked me upside the head and wanted to know what I was doing sitting on the front porch with that old Aubrey Johnson. And it was, I don't know what would have happened if it had been 5 or 6 of them, because it was only a single shot, and I only had 1 shell. Had 3 in my pocket, though. So you know, I tried to explain to him what I was doing, but he didn't. He said, boy, you're going to get killed. You're going to get hung. You can't do that. That's not what it's all about. The law is the law, and they control the law. And I said, you know, they control the law only because we let them control the law. At some point in time, some of this has to change.
So tell us about your, like, going through school.
Going through school.
Yeah, elementary to what do you have, junior high,
Mm-hmm.
then the high school. What were some of your favorite memories? What were some memories that really taught you and really shaped you as a young black man? And moving into, I know you're moving into the civil rights movement, but what is it during school time that shaped you and gave you that character that you needed to confront the things that were about to happen later in your life?
Well, the first thing that stands out in my mind in school was sports. Like any young male, I worship Joe Louis, Jackie Robinson, these people. I saw them as a way out, as a way to get away from this sector of life. And that time, that's what I'm thinking. If you go over here, maybe like to New York or the big cities, things might change. Not realizing until later in life that those problems existed over there too. But at least they lived what we thought then was the glamorous life. And I wanted to be a baseball player in the worst way. And I remember a guy came to the school, a young white gentleman, I can't recall his name, and he wanted to teach people how to play the guitar, completely free. He was going to furnish the guitars and all. Awfully nice man and quite sincere. I think that's when you learn at that point in time, that not everybody white was a Klan member, and that not everybody white is a bad person. So you have to take people as individuals. And this man offered us an opportunity to learn to play the guitar. And a lot of other guys did. So you had a choice. You could stay in at recess and learn to play the guitar, or you could go out on the field and play baseball. Well, of course, I chose to go out on the field and play baseball. Now I wish I learned how to play the guitar. But that was one of the things that opened my eyes to the fact that change had to be made. So far as learning was concerned, we were not given the best opportunity to learn because we were not given the best of equipment. We had books that came from white schools. A lot of the pages were missing, so the teacher would have to skip over, and oftentimes the teachers had to improvise. A lot of things that we learned in those books were basically about white people. There was very, very little except about slavery, and demeaning things about black folks were in those books. And we learned later on, and I questioned that too, because outside of the realm of the school, you would hear various stories about African American folks, well, like Joe Louis and Jackie Robinson, and these people, what's her name, played tennis, Wilma Rudolph. And these people, you know, you would hear about them, and you're thinking, well, wait a minute, why is none of this in these books? You heard about these great labor movements and things that blacks were involved in, and you're thinking, why is none of that in these books? You heard stories about inventions by a number of black folks, and how patents were stole from black folks, but then how a number of black folks, their patents, Booker T. Washington, these people, Dr. Robert Moton. But you wonder, well, why is none of this in these books? It wasn't in the books because the white folks didn't print it in the books. And they didn't print it in the books because, well, you didn't understand it then, but they didn't print it in the books because it was a systematic system to keep you dumb and stupid. So if it wasn't there for you to learn about, you didn't know about it, and if you don't know about it, you're ignorant to the fact. As long as you're ignorant to the fact, you remain under the segregationist control.
Now, what were your teachers like?
The teachers were extraordinary. Like I said earlier, they had to improvise. And there were teachers like Kersey Jones, Miss Reed, Miss Butler, who, God bless her soul, is still living, Mr. Neal, Mr. Dotson, Mr. Crawford here in Westminster. These teachers had a lot of times the materials that we did learn about things in the outside world. These teachers took it upon themselves to get this kind of stuff for us. Now there was Miss May Prince, who worked in the school system, and she taught at Robert Moton, but she, along with Miss Grimes and Miss Mamie Dixon, were responsible for us later on, but especially by the time we got to the 6th grade in high school, to get a lot of decent material and from which we could learn. And Miss Grimes, of course, was a white lady, and Miss Prince was black, and of course you know Miss Mamie Dixon. But these people were literally, the three of them were responsible for us getting a lot of what we termed at that time modern learning. And you begin to learn things about, like I said, Joe Louis and these people. You not only heard Joe Louis on the radio, but you were able now to sit down and read about Joe Louis, learn a little bit about his life, and Jackie Robinson and these people, you know. And then along comes, a little bit later on in life, along comes Dr. King. You learn about Dr. Ralph Bunche. There was Thurgood Marshall. And these people, and you're saying to yourself, or I'm saying to myself, wait a minute. These people, they're calling them civil rights leaders, and when I first heard the term, I really didn't know what it meant. And I had to get deep into it to find out what's going on, what's this all about. Well, I learned that these people, you know, white folks were calling them agitators. Black people were calling them heroes, because these were the people who were willing to stand up and fight for what was rightfully ours. And I think that, coupled with the fact that we did not have the proper things to learn from, we weren't getting the proper things from the books that were given us, these were the things that actually, plus the fact that I wanted badly to become a professional athlete. And early on I knew that if I couldn't just go out there and hit that ball, I had to know something about things around me. I had to learn how to handle myself, because I did learn early on that some of the black folks in the business, especially the music business, were being literally taken to the cleaners by white folks. And this rubbed me the wrong way, you know. So basically that, coupled with the fact that I started learning about people, like I said, like Dr. Ralph Bunche, Thurgood Marshall, and so forth, a whole bunch that can't come to my mind right now. And a lot of Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman. We learned about Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad, and how she was going from the Eastern Shore, and like, wait a minute, Eastern Shore's just down the road from us. And then you begin to question, well, did Maryland have slaves? Yeah, Maryland had slaves. Eastern Shore is in Maryland. Did Carroll County have slaves? Yeah, Carroll County had slaves, because Carroll County is in Maryland. And these things start to all come together in your mind, and you decide at this point, well, I was hostile about it when I was younger. I'm now 13 or 14 years old. I'm in the high school, and as time went on, I became more determined that I just couldn't settle. And I'm trying to remember what slave said it. I was thinking about it the other day, and he said, I have to look it up, and he said, I'd rather be dead and in my grave than to live my life as a slave. And the more I learned about slavery, I became more determined that I would not have lasted. They'd have killed me because, I couldn't have lived that type of life.
Now, what kind of events did you participate in the civil rights movement? And can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, but let me take you back a ways.
Okay.
While in school was not the only thing that influenced my desire to become an active member or to become an agitator so far as civil rights was concerned. About 8 or 9 years old, Mr. Bill Hudson came to the school, and then he started calling parents and said he wanted to start a Boy Scouts troop.
Now, who was he? Just a member of the community?
Mm-hmm. He's from White Rock, yeah. In fact, his son William and Gary Hudson still live down there. Oh, they're the same community that Sidney Shepherd was from. And he said he wanted to start a Boy Scout troop. So he approached us, and when he said it, I thought, ooh, a Boy Scout troop. I'm thinking, what in the world is a Boy Scouts? I had no idea what the Boy Scouts were even. So he talked a bit about it and had some pictures and things, and excuse me, I saw these, at that time, white boys standing there in the uniforms, saluting the flag, and with the badges and things on, and I'm thinking, hey, that's cool. So I went home and told my mother and father, and I said, I want to join the Boy Scouts. And, of course, I had to explain what was going on. Well, as usual in our family, when you started talking about doing something, the next subject was money. How are we going to pay for it? And, of course, you had to have a uniform, and you had to have your books and things, and he explained all of this to us. So I said, well, I'll figure out a way to do it. Of course, at 8 years old, I'm working. I'm making a penny an hour. So, I'm getting rich. And, of course, by 9 and 10 and 11, I'm working for Mr. Willie Tobin in the evenings, cleaning out his chicken houses. And then by 10 or 11, I'm working on my cousin's farm. So I'm now making a little bit of money. So I said, well, I'll get the money. I'll pay for the UMS. So we had our first Boy Scout meeting. And I thought, whoa, this is great. Because now, you're learning about the Boy Scouts and that there are boys all over the world that are doing this thing. And we're going to go camping, and we're going to get, I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to see some other part of the world. And so I, between my little job, and back then, you used to take the pop bottles back to the store, and you got, with the small bottles, I think we got 2 cents. For the big bottles, we got a nickel. And I started gathering up bottles along the road, which people just handily threw away. Well, there was money in those bottles, and I'd throw them in my little crate on my bicycle and take them out of the store, cash the money in. Between that and what I made at work, I made enough money to get my Boy Scout uniform. And I remember the first time we put that bad boy on and we all assembled at the school. Let me tell you something, you couldn't tell us we weren't bad. we were bad. And that night, Mr. Hudson and Mr. Jim Green was the assistant scoutmaster. And they said, there was about 25 boys, and said, we need a troop leader. And all of us looking like, what is a troop leader? Well, I thought, wait a minute, that's the guy in the book. He's actually third in rank to the assistant scoutmaster. He's the guy that goes out there and drills everybody, and it comes down from the top. So I'm learning what authority is. It comes from there, the scout master, to the assistant scout master, to the troop leader, to the troops, And I'm thinking, hey, that's cool. So they said we're going to vote. We're going to do it democratically. Uh-oh. Another new word. What's democratically? What's the democratic process? So now when the question came up, and they taught us what the democratic process was. You do it by majority vote. And that's what we did. And we had little ballots. You wrote down who you thought out of the 25 should be the troop leader. Well, lo and behold, when they announced the winner, they said, John Lewis, you're the troop leader. And I'm like, you're talking to me? You know, and I'm trying to figure, well, why did they choose me? What do I have that's special? What do I have that's more than these other kids, 24 kids have? And I said, well, why me? And Mr. Green said, because your peers chose you. He said, that's a democratic process. So I'm thinking, okay, fine. I don't have the guts to bow out of this, and my knees are shaking so bad, I don't know whether it's my knees or my heart pounding, because I have no clue how this goes. But he took me aside, and outside of the meetings, he taught me what to do and how to do it. And I became very good at it. And the boys respected, because the one thing he said to me was, you learn to treat people like you want to be treated. You learn to respect people in order to get respect. And that stuck in my mind. But he also said, you're going to have to stand fast on what you believe in. Don't ever let anybody sway you, especially, but he said, make sure you're right. And you stand fast on what you believe in. And you're going to have to do it with your truth, as well as you have to do it in life. And that got me through. That's when I look back over it. That's when I recognized or felt like I was some sort of a leader. I don't know what. I didn't know where I was going from there. All I knew is that it was a motivative thing. This thing happened to me, and it gave me that boost that I needed. It gave me that confidence that I needed to actually face people, to stand up to people. And that was one of the highlights of actually growing up, along with the educational thing. Life from there on just started snowballing from one thing to the other.
I'm going to stop you right there for a second.
Sure.
Because Marcel, stop that for a minute. Okay. What were some of the events that you participated in the civil rights movement, and what would you say are some of the most important points that you gained from that?
Some of the, well, a long, long time ago, we developed in the county what we call the County Human Relations Commission. And I chaired that for a while, which was probably one of my first things. We did dip into a little bit of civil rights issues back when I was in the Boy Scouts. We got into some of the civil rights issues. And we did go out into the world. If I might digress for a minute, we did go out into the world, and we met a lot of other Boy Scouts. In the area of civil rights, our community was predominantly black. I'm going to back up for a second. But just outside of our community, to this side and to the lower side, were white youngsters. And you know, as youngsters, we got along fine. It wasn't until these youngsters became adults that they no longer wanted to participate with us or deal with us on the same level as they. We played baseball together. We played football together. We did all kinds of things, you know. And as I got older, we started, and in the Boy Scouts, we started to dealing in the civil rights issues. And as I got into my teens, well, first of all, what really happened was I quit school when I was 16. And I did that because I had to help support the family. And I got into the workforce. In the workforce is where you started really, the main workforce is where you started to really facing discrimination. And then we started to talking amongst ourselves, and we got together a group called the Carroll County Human Relations Commission. Myself, Bernard Jones, George Collins, and several others, and Dr. Phil Benzel, Dr. Jones and his wife, Iris Zepp, Dr. Bill David from the college, and we started the civil rights movement. just prior to that, I started talking through the Union Street Church about some of the problems, and on my own, Clarence Dorm and I remember the first activity actually I got into was a demonstration in front of the Carroll Theater. There was Clarence Dorm and myself and about eight or nine other people. I can't remember all their names, Shirley Magruder, Virginia Hughes, and some of these people. And we demonstrated in front of the Carroll Theater on behalf of civil rights, because the theater, as you know, was segregated downstairs. You could only go upstairs and sit. We learned that a gentleman lived in Towson, I believe it was. In that area, he owned the theater, the Carroll Theater. Across the street from the Carroll used to be a state theater. They closed that down. And he had several theaters around the country. So our goal was to get the theater integrated. Well, lo and behold, some people, some powers to be at the college, talked to the Baltimore Colts and got them involved. And that's when things made a major change in not just Westminster, but in the county. We, along with us forming the Carroll County Human Relations Commission, and I started to working back then, and by this time I'm married now, and I started to working with Congressman Perrin J. Mitchell, and I was at a function in Baltimore, and I don't recall exactly what the reason was, but I met Congressman Mitchell. And then we had a men's day at our church. I was in charge of the Methodist men's program. At that time, I was also chairman of the administrative board. And on that men's day, I got Congressman Mitchell, and I just seemed to click. And he was a civil rights advocate. And he supported a lot of what we were doing out here. And he came out on a men's day and he spoke to us. And then from that day on, we were in constant contact as to what to do and how to do it. And we went around the community. Basically, what we did in simple terms was when we had a discriminatory problem, rather than, let me put it this way. My first reaction was I noted in other problems or civil rights discriminatory or segregation, segregated areas, confrontations came out. People burning down, people rioting, people getting killed, people getting shot. And the last thing I wanted to do was to get somebody hurt. And most of the time, whenever there was a confrontation to be made, I set myself up as a sacrificial goat. And believe me, not because I'm brave. No, believe me, that was not it. I'm a big chicken to heart, and as the old saying goes, it's better to be a live chicken any day than a dead hero. So I bore the blunt of the confrontation, but I noticed that rather than going at it in a confrontational manner, we had to find another way. And it was what I termed back then, and I still do, I used the backdoor approach. And what the backdoor approach was, let me give you an example out of many of them. The one that stands out was Frock had a swimming pool. And that pool was for whites only. Now, I had done this before with a couple of restaurants and other places in town, but Frock's just stands out as an example. I went over to Gene. Of course, you know, we used to have activities at Gene's place, dances and things. So I went over to Gene one day and walked in, and he was sitting there.
Who's Gene?
Gene Frock used to own Frock's.
Okay.
What's that, Gene? Bond Street? Yeah, on Bond Street. And it's now a senior center. But then it was Frock's. He had a bit of a farm type thing, but he had this big hall. You could have dances and parties and things there. And he also had the swimming pool, which basically, as I know right now, was pretty much the only swimming pool in this area. And I just walked in one day. I called him and I said, I want to talk to you. And I went over and we sat down, and I don't like beer, but that was the day I drank beer. And he said, come on, have a beer. And I'm thinking, okay, if that'll lead into this conversation. So we sat down, we drank a beer or two, and we talked. And I talked him into just quietly integrating the pool. No press. And that's the way I tried to do everything, as quietly as possible. I found that when you did things nice and quiet and easy, and when you ease things into the public, when they realized it, it had already happened. And after it's already happened, you have no recourse. You can't say it doesn't work, because it's been working. You're just noticing it, but it's already working. You know. And we did this with the poll. We decided one day, no press, and we just picked one day when I took my boys, because I'm married. I picked the boys, and we went down to the swimming pool. Dr. Benzel and a couple others from the commission. We all went to the pool. We went in the pool. The white folks never batted an eye. They kept swimming. The kids got in and swam. It was no big mystery. The next day, the press got a hold of it. And it was, they tried really to make a big to-do out of it. But like I said, it had already happened then. And now some people, and Jones will say it, that we caused Frock to close the pool, but we really didn't. He had said to that day when we talked that he really didn't know how much longer, because of his health and his age and stuff, how much longer he was actually going to maintain the pool. He also told me from some inside scoop that actually Tony Town at that point in time had in the plans that they were going to open up a public pool. But he went on and did it, and things worked out fine. That was one of many ways, many times, that we went through the back door.
Now, what happened with the movie theater? What were the results of that?
We, excuse me. Like I said, the Colts came in.
How did they get in, and what exactly did they do?
They threatened to start boycotting things downtown if things didn't change downtown. Now, you know, even today, the organization swings an awful lot of weight and spends an awful lot of money. So I don't take credit for that. I give all the credit for that to Baltimore Colts, because little by little, things downtown started to change. You know, restaurants like Shark, for instance, Sharky's. One night we were at Shark. We decided to go into Sharky's and we refused service there. Well, about the time we were going to file suit, that's when the Colts said, hey, you know, unless things start to change, we're going to, excuse me, we're going to pull out of Westminster. We're going to pull out the college. And between the college, with its influence, and the Colts, that helped to start changing things in the county. Okay? I was into the civil rights movement, trying to desegregate restaurants and dealing with discriminatory actions in the schools, especially since my youngsters were now entering into schools under the new integration rules. And it was like almost every other day I was at the school, because my boys were into a fight because somebody's calling them a name and this kind of a thing. And it just got to the point where I was at the school so much until I think they posted a guard looking out for me, because the time I got to the principal's office, they knew I was coming. And I became, after integration in the Carroll County schools, I became the first African-American to chair a PTA. I was president of the East Middle School PTA. I was also became involved as first African-American to join the all-white Westminster Jay-Z's, their organization. I was there until I was actually too old. I served 2 terms as vice president, another term as, first vice president, and then I was housing chairman also for a year. I also became president of Hope Incorporated, which was a low-income housing. Hope stood for homeowner purchased effort. We started out taking houses uh, and remodeling them and then selling them to low-income people. Of course, later on, they bought up all of Union Street and redeveloped that. By that time, Bernard was chairman of the organization. I developed a youth group at the church called the Carroll County Pioneers. We did civil rights work. We went to the Poor People's Campaign in Washington and helped with that. Prior to that, I had been, a bunch of us had gone to the March on Washington, which in itself was certainly an inspirational thing. And it was one of those things that gave me that, it was like an explosion in me. Because when you got there and you saw this mall filled with 200,000 or 300,000 people, and they were all marching to the beat of the same drummer, if I live to be 100, that will be the highlight of my life. It was breathtaking. And I try to tell youngsters like him, you had to be there to appreciate it. And from there on, then we went to they passed public accommodations law back in, 64, I believe it was. When I was chairman of the Human Relations Commission, and we're all sitting around deciding that we should go to Annapolis and we should speak on behalf of the public accommodations law. I think Judge Wint was senator then. I'm not sure if I have that correct. But anyway.
What was the public accommodations? What were
public accommodations law meant that they were passing a law to give you equal rights to motels, restaurants, and non-privately owned things like bars and stuff like that. Now, private bars and private clubhouses were not included in it. Of course, they later came into the fold because they were otherwise losing business. But that's what the public accommodations law was. You didn't have to drive from Baltimore to Georgia you could now stay in a motel in this thing. And we were concentrating on the state of Maryland. And so we went down to Annapolis, and we met with the Congress people, the Senator went and whoever else was in charge then. And that moment they said, we think you all should speak on behalf of the public accommodations law. Well, we went just mainly to observe. We had no intentions of speaking. So Phyllis Scott, Bob Scott, I think Phil Benzel, and several others. Anyway, we sat right there in one of the rooms, and we wrote a speech. And then they said, this was one of these other times I got drafted. And they said, well, who's going to give it? And everybody turned and looked at me, and I'm like, I don't think so. Not before the General Assembly, the complete General Assembly? No. And then they said, you don't have a choice. You have to give this. So I thought, okay, all right. It would be totally unfair of me not to do this, because this is really my fight, not theirs. And they called me. We went out and rushed it and everything, and they called me. And I had the speech. And I had read over it and read over it and read over it. But when I got in front of the mic, something happened. And that little voice said, you don't need the speech. You already know the story because you lived it. And that's what I told. I told that story. I told it just like it was, the way I had lived it. And the place stood and applauded. And I'm like, you turn around and look and you go, who are they talking about? Are they applauding me? What did I do? What did I do? But anyway, that was another one of the highlights. After that, we coming up now into the school system. We needed somebody on the Board of Education. And someone said, well, John, why don't you why don't you go out? At that time, it was an appointed board by the governor. And they said, why don't you go for it? I remember, I'm trying to think of what her name was. It's been a while ago. The names escape me. But anyway, she and her husband were also on one of the commissions. And they said, well, John, why don't you go out for the Board of Education? I said, I'm not equipped to handle the Board of Education. But you see, I quit school at 16. I then went back and got my GED. I had then gone to Morgan at night for 2 years. But I just didn't feel that I was equipped to do the job. But I said to myself, well, if nobody else wants to do this, hey, I've jumped in with both feet before. I might as well jump in again. Not having any clue that the governor, who was Marvin Mandela at the time, was going to pick me to serve on the school board. Well, he did. Well, boy, pardon my French, but all H-E-double-L broke loose. The segregationists came out of the woodwork. They did not want me on that board. And years earlier, I'd gotten into a fight and had a simple assault charge against me. Well, they dug that up and blew it out of proportion. I had a criminal. Well, you'd have thought I murdered somebody. Went down, talked to Marvin Mandel. Him and I sat back in the governor's office, and he said, well, he said, we got two choices, John. I'm going to give it to you, and if I don't give it to you, you're going to leave here tonight and find me somebody else black to do it. I said, well, if I can't find anybody else black to do it, I will do it. He said, you're going to do it if I have to give you police protection. So on the way home, I called Bernie. And I told him the situation. He said, oh, good Lord. And I can remember his exact words. I don't want him digging in my pants. He said, I said, well, look, and this is about 10, 11 o'clock at night. I said, well, I'm coming by your house. We're going to have to do something. And so him and I sat down, and we said, well, who can we get? We said, Richard Dixon. So we called Richard, and in the beginning, let me explain this. It really wasn't about me being on the board anyway. Important thing was that an African-American got on that board. I didn't really, it could have been Mickey Mouse, as long as he was African-American, that he got on that board. So it really wasn't about me. I also learned another valuable lesson in life. If you have to do a job and you feel that you're not quite qualified to do it, or if you think you know somebody who can do it better than you, you support that person and put him out there. And I told Jones, I said, you know, Dixon is better qualified to do it. I said, and so are you. I said, you both got degrees from Morgan. I said, and Dixon has dealt in finances and business. So we talked to Dixon. And then we had to coach him because he really wasn't up to it. And we coached him into doing it. And he decided to do it, and that's how he got on the Board of Education. And of course, from there on, he went up because he was good and very good at what he did, and he was much more qualified than I was at doing the job. And he did an excellent job of it. And he, of course, as you know, went on to become a member of the House of Delegates, and then went on to become state treasurer. And as the old saying goes, the rest is history. But my life in the area of civil rights isn't over. It still goes on. What I would like to do now, I would like to sit back and be able to coach young people or to support them to go out there and do. I would like to retire, and from my job, when I do retire, I would like to just go around and teach young folks, talk to them about black history, talk to them about slavery, talk to them about the people who died in the struggle. Take people like we go every January, we go on a civil rights tour down through the Southland. And we've been to where Medgar Evers was killed. We've been to Dr. King's church. We've been all through that area. We've met people who they attempted to assassinate in Mississippi. One gentleman who still has 2 machine gun bullets lodged in his brain. I would like to be able to tell young people that story. That's how I would like to conclude this my life in the arena of civil rights. But so far as me actually stop fighting, no, that will be my way to fight, because the youngsters need to know that it takes years to build, but only seconds to tear down. And they need to know about the times of Reconstruction and stuff like that, when we once had and we quickly lost.